Sports Talk Chicago. And we're Jon Zaghloul, and we have Mackey and Brady for today's special guest. He's the CEO of Vikings Twitter and the host of Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily. SKOR North, please welcome Phil Mackey to the program. Phil, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. It was tricky getting the Vikings Twitter board members to vote me CEO, but here we are. One of the top executives on NFL Twitter. It's very exciting.
How'd that vote go down, by the way? How'd they choose you out of all people?
I think I just got them drunk one night, and they just they just said yes. So I'm really not sure it was much more complicated than that.
Did I catch you on a bad day? I know Kirk Cousins was retained, so I'm sure you're not feeling too happy today.
It's not the move I would have made. I will say this. Here's what I actually like about the extension. His cap hit was completely unworkable at $45 million. I also think even at $31 million, which is where they restructured it to in 2022, it's still the sixth highest cap hit among all quarterbacks in the NFL. And he has enough deficiencies where it just makes it really hard to build a roster around him. So I'm still not in love with just running it back. I mean, the Vikings have just been pressed up against the cap. They've had holes in their offensive line. Their defense is aging and regressing. And I just don't think you fix that by trying to clear 15 or 20 million in cap here. Like, it feels like they need a reset. And I don't think you have to go into a full on tank, but this just felt like the perfect time for a reset. New general manager, new coach, a market of like 8 or 9 quarterback needy teams. And we've seen all the different movement in the quarterback carousel. So it felt like a perfect time for them to take a step back for the sake of taking two steps forward, but they're going to run it back. I mean, they've signed up to try and win at a Super Bowl level. I mean, it sounds crazy, but like, why else would you not? I mean, I've heard that they had decent offers on the table, maybe a couple second round picks from a couple different teams. And they chose to say no and run it back again with Kirk Cousins. So are they going to be a disaster? Probably not. Are they still going to hit the same 8 or 9 win glass ceiling? Probably, which is where they've been most of my life.
And how much did your perspective change too when you heard about Tom Brady returning and then Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay as well?
Yeah, I think the Brady thing is really interesting.
Right.
Especially just like the last minute nature. I think the Rodgers thing to me made it even easier to hit the reset button because the Packers have a better team. The Packers have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL now who's going to stick around. And it just kind of gives you permission to bow out. I think if Rodgers had retired or had demanded a trade, say to the Broncos, then the Vikings may have looked at it and said, okay, well, wow, the Packers have Jordan Love now as their starting quarterback. The Bears are very much in reset mode and Justin Fields is unproven. And the Lions are the Lions. So let's bring Kirk back and run it back. I thought that Rodgers staying around would have made it even more likely that the Vikings move on from Cousins. But again, here we are.
What happened to Kellen Mond? Why is he not getting an opportunity?
Well, it's so hard to know with any of the young players that were drafted. The Vikings drafted 11 players in 2011 or 2021, I should say. And Christian Darrisaw, their first round pick, was the only one that played significant snaps on offense. Kene Nwangwu had a couple special teams touchdowns, but other than that, Mike Zimmer just didn't play young guys. And, Kellen Mond wasn't going to play anyways because he was behind Kirk Cousins on the depth chart, but he couldn't even get active for 90% of the games. And then when he came out there in sort of an emergency for 3 snaps, I think it was against the Packers, he looked pretty unprepared. It was pretty bad. Mike Zimmer doubled down and just kind of crapped on him in the post-game press conference. So we don't know. We don't know about him. Wyatt Davis. It's just Mike Zimmer and that staff, I don't think were equipped, especially by the end, to develop young offensive players, had no interest. I mean, you couldn't get Mike Zimmer to meet with Kirk Cousins for 45 minutes a week until the 4th season. Do you think he's even making eye contact with Kellen Mond in the hallway? Probably not.
What do you make of the new coaching staff and the new regime, at least in Minnesota? Does it look more promising than what they had before?
Yes. I mean, I do think people are going a little bit too far, just, making Mike Zimmer out to be this horrible head coach and this cancerous figure. I mean, Mike Zimmer was like 15 or 16 games above 500 over an 8-year stretch. He went to the playoffs a small handful of times. his worst season, I think, was 7-9. So, let's not act like Zimmer was an incompetent idiot of a head coach. I think the way that Bears fans talk about Matt Nagy at the end, like Viking, like maybe some of that was justified. Mike Zimmer definitely deserved to go because of the way that he just sort of burned the building down internally. Him and Rick Spielman were not on speaking terms anymore. But to say that clearing out Zimmer and then running it back with the same roster or similar is going to be, like, oh, now they're going to tack on 4 wins to their total. I think there's more moves to be made. But I will say in 2022 NFL, I think you need an offensive guru at head coach. I think you need someone with Kirk who's going to be able to maximize his skill set and just have a good relationship with him. That's the thing about Cousins. I'm not a big Kirk Cousins guy. I think there's just a glass ceiling on him. He's like a high floor, low ceiling quarterback, but he's been saddled with probably the worst possible head coach pairing that he could have found in Mike Zimmer. So Kevin O'Connell has a relationship with them going back to Washington and should be able to, if there's another level to unlock, Kevin O'Connell will have a better chance to do that.
Are you at all concerned that Cousins is 34 years old, certainly not a rookie, and they're still kind of in developmental mode with him? They still want to get somewhere further. Is that a problem for you?
I mean, yeah, like it's at some point you kind of are who you are. I think what bothers me the most about the Cousins discussion is everyone's trying to, theorize about, okay, if you can just get him an offensive line, and then if you can just get him a different coach and a defense, it's like, okay, well, yes, all of those things would be amazing. But how many teams in the NFL in today's salary cap structure have perfect or top 5 coach, perfect top 5 offensive line defense? He's been a starting quarterback for 7 years. And throughout the duration of those 7 years, he's had incredible weapons. He's had Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, go back to Washington, Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Jordan Reed, Dalvin Cook. Like, he's had weapons all over the place. He's had 2 top 10 and 1 top 5 defense early with the Vikings the first couple of years. For in terms of assistants and coordinators, he's had Kevin Stefanski, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, Kyle Shanahan. Now, has he had all of these things at once at the same time? No, but who does? So he's just been this gravitational pull toward 500. If you are a 4-win team or a 5-win team, like the Panthers, for instance, and you're looking to become a 500 team, he's the perfect guy for you. But if you're the Minnesota Vikings and you've been around for 60 years and you've never won a Super Bowl before, he's probably just going to pull you, to the first round of the playoffs in a good season. Again, he never came close to a title in high school, college. So I think he's good. I think he's one of the 15 best quarterbacks in the world, but I just think that there's a glass ceiling on a Kirk Cousins team, even at his reduced cap hit for 2022.
What moment prompted all this hatred and outrage towards Kirk Cousins? Anything specific?
I don't know if it's like hatred. I just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl. And I think, and I'm not going to spend the whole offseason doing this. Like, now I think the conversation turns toward, all right, what can they do? How can they make the best of it? I mean, as you and I are sitting here recording this, one of my big things is, well, you got to go. You got 3 solid offensive linemen, and then your center is a bust, Garrett Bradbury from the first round 3 years ago, and your right guard led the league in penalties. So, like, you got to find a new center, new guard. And I'm looking, there's like 6 of the best centers and guards are already off the board in free agency today because the Vikings have cap troubles. So I think they need to find a way to clear cap space to fix the offensive line and to get younger on defense. And if they can do those things, then okay, they have a 2-year window here until Cousins is a free agent to see if they can make some noise and contend in a pretty wide open NFC. But I don't know, when you watch him play versus when you stare at the box score, it's a different product. His box score screams Pro Bowls and borderline Hall of Fame. But when you watch him play and you watch him lead, and I've had people who are in the know is just talk about how underwhelming he is as a leader. It's 2 different stories, box score versus reality.
Do you have a specific example that you could think of where you watched him play and it was just totally underwhelming?
Well, he lined up under the right guard in a key moment at one point last season. I think that was against Carolina or somebody. And I think the biggest thing when it comes to leadership, there was a game, and I forget exactly which game it was, but there was a fiasco toward the end of the first half where the Vikings let like 30 seconds bleed off the clock, and they wound up they wound up like settling for a field goal or something. It was like one of those obvious call a timeout situations, and they just like didn't. And somebody asked him after the game, why didn't you call timeout in that situation to try and further the drive? And he said, well, I just, Coach Zimmer calls the timeouts, and I was just kind of waiting to see if they were going to call it. So it's like, wait a second, dude, you're 33 years old. You're a $30+ million franchise quarterback, and you're deferring to the sideline in a 2-minute drill for when a timeout should be called. And then then the season ends and the general manager gets blown out. The head coach gets blown out. Okay. Wow. That's the biggest shakeup in recent Vikings history. And they trot out Brian O'Neill, the right tackle, Adam Thielen, and Eric Kendricks to speak publicly. And Kirk Cousins was silent for a month. So stuff like that. It's like, if you're going to be the leader of the franchise, be the leader of the franchise. You've been in the league long enough, man. Like, you don't have to ask permission to lead. So do it. So yeah, I guess those are the most recent things that I can think of.
Phil Mackey here on Sports Talk Chicago. Phil, when you look at the Bears situation, how does it compare to the Vikings?
Well, for one, I think it's comparable in that both franchises wanted Ryan Pace to be, Ryan Poles, right? Ryan Poles. Yep. Ryan Poles was, I think, the number one target for the Vikings, and he wound up choosing the Bears. I don't know if the Bears offered him more money or what happened, but like, it was kind of a bidding war between the two. But in general, listen, Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Justin Fields today. But in terms of value and the next 3 years, I want the rookie scale contract quarterback. I want to roll the dice on that 5-year window where you're not really paying a lot of money to a quarterback, build a roster around that guy. And if you can look at what the Chargers are doing. I know the Chargers didn't make the playoffs last year, but the Chargers just added like 3 or 4 big names over the past. They obviously added Khalil Mack. So because Justin Herbert makes $6 million. So if you hit on Justin Fields, even to the point where he's an average quarterback, hell, the Bears made the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky a couple times, right? Didn't you guys win like 12 games with Trubisky? Not because of Trubisky being great. It's because the roster was great around him. And that's the luxury you get. The Vikings have made the playoffs with Tavares Jackson, with Christian Ponder, with Teddy Bridgewater. And it wasn't because those guys were leading the team to the playoffs. It's because those guys are cheap. Just don't crash the car, right?
What do you think about Fields himself, his skill set? When you watched him play the 2 Vikings games too, but the Bears and the Vikings faced off, what do you think about him?
I like him. Big arm. I think, tough to bring down. He's got a big body. It doesn't seem like, one hit's going to knock him out for the season, knock on wood. I didn't love what he was saying before the season about how, has the game slowed down? And he kind of made that comment about how, the game's actually really slow or whatever. It's like, let's wait 5 minutes until you start facing regular season NFL defenses. So I think it remains to be seen, how exactly does he process information, and is he going to be able to rise up higher than Mitch Trubisky did a few years back? But in general, like I said, I think the Vikings sniffed around in that draft, and they made a couple offers to try and trade up into the top 10 because they like Justin Fields. And then they wound up saying, maybe we don't like him that much. Let's grab a tackle and then grab Kellen Mond in the early part of the 3rd round. But if I'm a Bears fan, I don't know if I'm excited for 2022 as much, but like, I'm excited for a 3-year window here. If I'm a Bears fan.
You think the Vikings exceed the Bears this year?
Yeah, I do. I don't think I think both teams are sort of fighting to be in that 7 to 9 win range right now. If the Vikings add an offensive lineman and, if they do a couple things cap wise to bolster the defense too, then I think the Vikings are a legitimate 9 or 10 win team. Probably not fighting the Packers for the division, because I think the Packers are still more in that 12 win range. But that's the thing, like, Kirk Cousins guarantees the Vikings are going to be competitive, but he also, to me, guarantees that they're not going to be as competitive as like the Buccaneers if everyone's healthy, or the Rams if everyone is healthy. But I think the Bears and the Vikings are fighting for number 2 in the division. Yeah.
How soon is the Super Bowl going to come to Minnesota?
Oh man, probably the next time we build a stadium. I think we got the Metrodome in 1992, and then got the one from 5 years ago. Now, what people don't realize, people were complaining about how cold it was at that 2018 Super Bowl. And it was cold. It got to be like, I think, below 0 wind chill. The next year, the exact same week, the next year, when the Super Bowl was somewhere else in Atlanta or somewhere, there was a day, it was like Wednesday that week, where the wind chill was minus 53 degrees. And I'm just thinking, man, what if all these people from like Miami and Los Angeles were in town, from internationally even, and they step foot off the airplane and it's minus 53 wind chill. And I don't know if it gets that cold in Chicago, but like, you can feel a blast of cold air in Chicago too. But I thought we did a pretty good job. Pretty good party throwers in the Twin Cities, but I don't think it's going to happen for a while.
What'd you do, especially that week? Anything come to mind?
Well, we had a chance to do. At the time we were doing a 4-hour morning radio show on 1500 ESPN, and that was my first time on Radio Row, and it was a blast. I mean, it's just a car wash of people. Terry Bradshaw walks by, and all these people, these recognizable celebrities and football people, and so I think just being on Radio Row for a week and just having a bunch of fun conversations with people was probably the highlight. And I think a lot of Vikings fans were so sad and in the dumps because if they hadn't lost the NFC Championship game to the Eagles, they would have played a home Super Bowl. And it was hard to really be like all in, I think, mentally, emotionally for Vikings fans, because you're watching these Eagles fans fly in to your city after beating the brakes off you in the NFC Championship game. So my wife and I, we didn't even go to the game. We actually just went to a pork chop house down the street and watched on TV while enjoying a nice restaurant and a glass of wine.
Phil Mackey still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Phil, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, your career. How'd you get your start?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I knocked on the door. This is in 2004, 2005, of the small town AM radio station in the city that I went to high school in, Buffalo, Minnesota. I was just looking for a summer internship. I knew that I wanted to work in sports. I played some high school baseball, and I always wanted to maybe get into sports media. And so I knocked on the door and asked if they had any internships. And they said, well, we don't do internships, but we're looking for a play-by-play guy to do high school baseball games this summer. And I'm like, okay, I've never done that before. And they said, that's fine. We're desperate. So I just started doing high school baseball play-by-play when I was like 18 years old, got an internship, unpaid 11-month internship at KFAN, the big, Vikings flagship sports radio station, the Twin Cities, and just said yes to every opportunity after that. And wound up covering the Vikings for the website, getting weekend shows, et cetera. And I think Brett Favre coming to Minnesota in 2009 was so big for a lot of careers, including my own. And that, they're just looking, like Sports Centers, looking for people to talk about Brett Favre every day. And so you find, I'm 23 years old at the time, and I find myself on Sports Center talking about Brett Favre every other day. And so, that kind of parlayed into, there was a second sports station that launched in 2010. And they were looking for some young talent to pair with their old, sports writer duo, Suchere and Royce. So they hired Tom Pelissero and me to run their website and do shows in the afternoon and evenings. And from there, it's been a blast, man. If you would have asked like 12, 15-year-old Phil Mackey, hey, how would you feel blabbing about sports and complaining about Kirk Cousins for like 10 years and getting paid for it? I would have said, oh, it's great. That sounds awesome.
What prompted your move to digital content? I know, at SKOR North, you guys are doing something a little bit different than the traditional radio station. How did that all come about too?
Yeah, I think there was a point where, so Hubbard Radio is the company, the parent company that I work for. And there was just a certain point a few years ago where, at least for us in the Twin Cities, and by the way, if you hear pounding in the background, they're just, we had some, it's just Kirk Cousins knocking on my door actually to fight. It's I got a carpenter downstairs fixing some flooded carpet, but I think they just realized that for us anyways, the AM radio model wasn't working from a business standpoint. And I had all these ideas about how to reach younger audiences through podcasting and video and social media. So, credit to the company for believing in the vision of what sports content can and should look like and how it can be delivered for the next 5 or 10 years. I think if we had a big FM radio station, I don't think we'd be having this conversation, but it's just sort of the lifeline that we had to grab was podcast, video, social media, and grow audiences that way. So that's kind of what we've done. I mean, my co-host Judd Zaghloul's in his mid-50s, early 50s, newspaper and radio guy at heart, and he's made the transition with us. And we produce Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily as podcasts first and foremost, and we still do some radio too. But it's opened up a whole new door of people that discover the show through YouTube that have no idea that we've been doing this for like 10 plus years on the radio side. Like, who are these new guys? So you grind away and you find ways to connect with people.
Phil, before we finish up today, last question. What's the funniest moment that you've had in your career?
Oh my gosh. There's so many. There's so many with Patrick Royce that are just inappropriate. I probably can't tell on there, but I think the one that stands out the most is back in 2005. I was doing like my second or third ever high school baseball play-by-play event. And the first one without a partner. They would send two of us out there usually. And so this game was being played in, some backfield in like St. Michael, Minnesota. And the station manager said, I'll drive the station bus out with the equipment. And you literally had to like set up an antenna that went up 20 feet in the air and a Marty and all this like old technology. And so he's going to come out and help me set it up. And so we set it up and he said, hey, I'm not going to stick around for the game. I'll drive your car back to the studio and you can pack up and drive the bus back, 10 miles and after the game. And I'm just like so caught up in just trying to do the game. I'm not thinking about any ramifications here. I said, yeah, whatever. That's fine. So the game gets over. It's dark out. It's a 4-field complex with one of those little concession stand buildings in the middle with like the pointed top and the roof with shingles that comes down. So I pack up all the equipment. I fire up the bus and I realize a couple of things. Number one, there's no interior lights at all. They're all out. So I can't as I got driving later, I couldn't see like how fast I was going or anything. It was total train wreck. But the second thing I realized was I've never driven anything that you had to worry about how tall the vehicle was. And as I'm going around the corner trying to get out of this 4-field complex, I lodged the bus under the overhang of the concession stand. And there is a softball game happening on the field next to it. And the game stops. Everyone looks over. There's like shingles falling off the roof. And I'm like in tears. I'm, 18 or 19 years old. And I don't know. They helped me unlodge it somehow. And I went on my way. It was all kind of a blur, but I called the station manager and told him I thought I was going to get fired. He didn't even take anything out of my paycheck. He just said, I probably shouldn't have had you drive that bus back. So this one's on me. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. Never drove that thing ever again.
Phil, thank you so much for joining me. Great stories, great Vikings talk as well. Really appreciate the time and best wishes over at SKOR North with Purple Daily and Mackey and Judd.
Thanks, John.